Thank you everyone for joining. We're excited to have you with us. My name is Braden from Anglepoint, and we're extremely excited for this webinar. Because this is a pre-recorded webinar, we won't be having a question and answer session at the end. However, if you do have questions, we strongly encourage you to reach out to us at our website at anglepoint.com or through email info@anglepoint.com. Or you can reach out to either Jan or Dandy individually, as we will provide their contact information near the end of this presentation. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jan to get started.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate for everyone who will watch that pre-recorded webinar. And as Braden said, whenever there is a question, you can reach out directly to us, and we are happy to answer all of your questions that are related to that subject. Yeah, what's the topic of this webinar? You may have seen it also in the link that was provided to get to the webinar recording. We're actually talking today about a so-called fit gap analysis for the perfect deal. I actually like the second line much better, when it's all about right sizing and right pricing of license and support agreements that you have in your organization. And we definitely will talk about something which Benjamin Franklin said is, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And this is what we see quite often with companies when it's about to prepare themselves for an upcoming negotiation with a software publisher or a service provider. Let's go to the next slide. Just a short disclaimer: whatever we say is definitely related to our current position, but we definitely also have prediction estimates in our presentation, which we consider being forward-looking statements. So whatever it is that you think needs to be taken from this webinar, just take it as that this is our experience as experts, where we think that there is value in providing these statements to you. I'll go to the next slide. Just a short introduction. Braden already mentioned my name. My name is Jan Hachenberger. I'm a vice president at Anglepoint, located in Germany and responsible for business development in the region for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. I have more than 15 years of experience around enterprise architecture and IT asset management. Prior to my work with Anglepoint, I actually was a managing director for a SAM consulting company, and prior to that, worked for KPMG several years in the department for license audit, software compliance, and before that, 7 years for DHL Deutsche Post in the demand management department for IT. And yeah, that's kind of my background. I'm also a licensing expert for a couple of software publishers listed here in that slide. I'll hand it over to Dandy.
Hi, my name is Dandy Sabo. It's my pleasure. I'm a procurement expert for complex projects, especially in IT and indirect services. With the age of 20, I was educated as a procurement consultant for indirect spend by Hewlett-Packard to deal with big IT outsourcing projects to negotiate the needed global services. We can go then to the next slide if you like to.
Okay, thank you, Dandy. You may ask yourself of why Dandy and I are actually in this webinar. Dandy is the CEO of JD1998, a company we partner with when it comes to helping customers in not just have a good understanding about the actual demand in their IT when it comes to certain software products, IT services, etc., but also to have a real experienced partner that helps them customers in getting into a negotiation with one of those software publishers or providers to get that deal that you're looking out for. So I'll go to the next slide. So just a short info about Anglepoint, and you probably have already got in contact with us as a company by going through or to our website. So we are a leading IT asset management consulting firm. We are more than 10 years old. most of our employees actually have either a Big Four background as being software auditors, or came from software publishers with massive experience around the products, around the operating models for those software services, about licensing. So we really have it end to end when it comes to IT lifecycle. And yes, we support large organizations around the world, some of well-known brands that actually also use our managed services. So it's not just that we provide consulting services, but also managed services where we are then taking over parts of the license management, demand management, etc. And let's just hand it over again to Dandy to introduce JD 1998.
Yeah, JD 1998 is specialized in supporting big companies with critical and high volume projects in regards to worldwide tender processes and negotiations, and as well de-escalations.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so let's go to the next slide. So what we want to show you today is, as I put it out in the first slide, like the actual tone of this presentation is all about right sizing and right pricing. So we want to give you a little bit background information of what we see with quite a few customers that we work with. So when we got into this customer and identified several deficiencies, lack of transparency, lack of data, lack of reliable information, and what the actual complication related to that lack of information then actually looked like. And I think we have a very good solution to overcome some of those issues that we see with quite a few customers. And then we also want to show you a couple of real next steps that you may take on your own, but where you may consider also asking for our help. So let's go to the next slide. So if I would ask you that question, what determines the perfect license and support deal? Well, we see quite a few customers that may say, I had a very conversation with a software publisher, and they just gave me an additional 20% discount because I just was kind of, pushing. I kept on pushing, and then they agreed and gave me a better discount. And, in some cases, the customer may be happy with that, but was it really the perfect deal? Let's look into this, So actually, when we talk with customers and they then tell us that they have, a good deal that's now on the table, a good license or support agreement, we then, just need to ask a couple of questions. The first question that we would ask is something like, do you have a deal that is really reflecting your actual demand? Which means, so does the agreement reflect what you currently use and what you want to use in the future? Most agreements, either for a license agreement or a service agreement, are set to have at least a 3-year duration, in some cases even 5 years, especially when it comes to cloud subscriptions. Software publishers like Microsoft or SAP in particular, they want you to commit, which means they want you to give a number on the number of employees, users, certain services, features that you want to actually then include in the contract, where you may go in with something like an expectation. Question is, what happens if that expectation never really substantiates? When something happens because of something like COVID. We will have a slide on this in particular, but when we consider a good deal, it actually should include some level of flexibility where you can up or down scale, for instance, based on the actual demand, where you can swap products. So where you can exchange product A with product B, things like that. So is actually that deal that you have, the contract, reflecting these, these aspects related to your actual demand, current and future? Next question. Is it actually service fit, which means whatever you agree with a software publisher or service provider, do those publishers or service providers really align their SLAs with your business requirements? So you may get a good deal, but the service levels are so low, you know, and that was just because the service provider or publisher gave you a better price by actually reducing the service level. So you have to balance it out. So it has to also be in alignment with your service requirements. And, you know, that really to ensure then full operation and, you know, in worst case, really business continuity. Next step would be the architecture fit, which means you may get a good deal, but actually the software you purchase doesn't really fit into your IT architecture. It may be something way out of your comfort zone. It may be the second or third workflow solution that you now purchase, even though you already have one, which is well established. But, you know, maybe just because of an additional feature, someone really asked for a new license agreement with another publisher or service provider. So you always need to ask yourself, is the product or service you buy really aligned with your overall IT architecture requirements, your enterprise architecture? And last but not least, well, you need to know whether that partner you will work with is actually a good fit for you. So does this partner really share the same vision and strategy as you? Is that partner willing to go the extra mile? Will they throw in some extra hours of consulting? So are they really interested in, you know, that you as a customer really really generate those benefits that, you know, may have been just documented on the marketing slide from that publisher or service provider? So do they really bring in, do they bring something extra into this partnership with you? Or is it just basically you pay the money, they provide the services or the software licenses, and that's it? There is no other means of communication between the both. So these are just 4 of the main topics that we see. There are others as well, but really when we say that's a real perfect license and support deal, we expect that those 4 areas are actually also scrutinized, and you have an answer, hopefully, that you can take then into a discussion. And sometimes it could be that a lack of architecture fit, which you make transparent to a software publisher, leads to a better pricing because that publisher just wants to sell the product, and you may need it here and there, right? So there's just a few examples here. Now let's go to the next slide. Change. Think about it. I mean, we just said that you are talking with software publishers most likely on a regular basis, a couple times a year with different publishers. If you have not just one, like most large enterprises have hundreds of publishers that they work with, and I would say at least 20 or more service providers somehow related to your IT. And now we're talking about change because you agree to something now, which will then, you know, basically dictate of what will happen within the next 36 months or even longer, but then you're actually going for something like that. We're talking right now about a massive change in our society, in our world, in our culture of how we work, and you know, business is not looking perfectly right now. I mean, economy is going down. We're talking about layoffs. We're talking about you know, real negative impact of COVID right now. And that more or less leads then to a reduced demand in IT, which, you know, should be reflected in an agreement. Most software publishers or service providers are trying to stay away from any discussion to, for instance, also stop paying maintenance or terminate licenses that you don't need anymore, things like that. But it's needed. It's desperately needed right now to adjust to this change that comes with something like Corona. And this is just an example that is currently, I think, you know, discussed by pretty much everyone, not just in the business, in private life, etc. But we are also talking about something like a need to digitize processes, to have more work from home opportunities, to actually allow new work models, where you may have additional need for maybe something like remote desktop access, or where you need to have secured VPN lines to actually then allow access from private devices to the company network. So all of that is something that no one planned for, but it's now there, and you need to check your agreements actually that they can handle such a change. And if they can't, you should consider actually going to your software publisher or service provider right now to request them to also or not also, but to change the contracts that you have, so that they are more flexible and allow for, you know, any change that may come in the future. And hopefully, and we, you know, keep the thumbs up, things are hopefully going better or coming, getting to a better state in the near future. Next slide. So what we see though is whenever you have the ambition to have that discussion with your software publisher and your service provider, you may feel reluctant to actually have the discussion. I mean, who wants to have a phone call with Microsoft or Oracle and say, you know, guys, my problem is that I have short-time work right now for 50% of my workforce. And by the way, I want to reduce my on-premise software by so and so many percent. On the other hand, I want to increase cloud. They will like the second part more than the first part of the conversation, because selling more, definitely, you know, you will get their buy-in. But when it comes to actually reducing licenses, reducing maintenance, no software publisher will like that conversation. But if you want to actually have a conversation like that, and if you want to prevent that you're missing the target again, and you may be just talking about pricing, then you need to have certain insights, you need transparency and all of these things. You need skills to actually have that conversation. And we see that quite often things that are documented on that slide are missing with the customers we're talking to. And maybe it's also a reason why they pull us in. So most customers that we have worked with started a conversation with us because they were lacking transparency on their current and future IT demand. So they knew about the contracts that they have signed, but they really didn't know what software is really in use or what software was used by what user, in which context, how often, etc. On the other hand, most customers, besides the marketing information that you can get from websites, from publishers or service providers, really don't know what's available and what's the best fit solution for the actual requirements in the organization. So there's a lack of knowledge on potential IT solutions or service providers. Maybe it's not always the big names that you should select, but who knows about maybe a local or regional service provider that have better service level or may have a better service setup. So where did you get that information from, or where do you get that information from? On the other hand, you also may have unclear requirements for your IT operating model, which means you know you need, let's say, Windows servers and Oracle databases, but you're not really clear whether you have the capabilities, skills, the infrastructure to actually run that software, or would it be better from a total cost of ownership perspective to give this into a hand of a service provider, or maybe even directly go to the software publisher and say, hey, dear Oracle, I would like to actually run my workloads in your Oracle cloud. And what can we do to make this work, right? So, but you know, it's not just to go the easy way that, you know, you may think cloud is, not necessarily. It may be totally unaligned with all the other activities in your organization, or vice versa. Last but not least, from a right sizing perspective, you may not know all the terms and conditions that you can or should, in the first place, should negotiate into an agreement. You don't really have the insights of what other companies, peers in your industry have agreed with those large organizations. There may be analysts that actually provide you with insights, and I would say you can definitely rely on that, but real life examples are sometimes hard to find. We have them, and we can bring that to the table. So really what you can put in as a specific license term which allow for flexibility. And just to be very generic here, but that could be something like a flexible license agreement where you can exchange licenses unless as long as you keep the total license value the same, and then you can more or less mix and match as you go along in the term of the agreement, something like that. Or where you can just really have a temporary layoff of maintenance or permanent termination. And the right precise wording that you can bring in front of a software publisher, that's something that we have for most of the publishers that you probably have in your organization. For the strategic ones, definitely, like Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, IBM in particular, where we are also an IBM authorized SAM service partner, one of 4 globally. So we definitely have those insights we can bring in, not just really to understand what you really need in your organization. And since we cover most of the software publishers that you could consider strategic, So we know what you may be better off. Is it then either like going with AWS or going with Azure? Is it better to do things with Microsoft as the operating system for a server, or to go with Red Hat? And so on and so forth. This is what we have. And if you then make a decision to go with one of those publishers, we actually know what should be in the agreement as terms and conditions. Now, that's more or less preparing that field for the actual commercial side of things. So where we would say you need to have benchmark information, and you need to have the negotiation skills and better practices on how to deal with publishers and service providers. But I hand it over to Dandy to give more insights on that.
Yeah, many thanks. In regards to the benchmark, from the experience out of the consultancy, especially if it comes to the tender process, what we recognized is that most of our clients are not having the deep knowledge about pricing and alternative solutions on the market to reduce contractual risk and further costs. So that's one point. The other, in regard to, let's say, the lack of negotiation, is as well, out of our experience we have, is that we see often that clients have bought more licenses out of the idea to get a more value for money, but the result is often that the licenses they think they got out of a good deal cannot be rolled out in the estimated time, which ends in yearly costs of service fees and for unused, finally for unused licenses, right?
Yeah. And then you're missing the target. You know, someone made the decision to go with a service provider or software publisher to really set the agreement. Budget had to be approved. And we're always talking about something like a project, even though it's something like a continuous operation when we look at IT. But at the end of the day, it's kind of coming in waves. You know, every 3 years you're going through the same process with the publisher again to get to hopefully something like keeping the costs at the same level. I mean, most customers have the expectation that costs will go down. Actually, our experience is slightly different. Let's go to the next slide. What we see, as Dandy actually pointed out, is that we see that many customers negotiate unfavorable IT service and software license agreements. And overpurchase is what Dandy said. Most of those license agreements are then first of all, they start with something like a demand collection. What are we planning to do? What's the carrot we want to put in front of the nose of the software publisher to get a better deal? And then you bring things in like, oh, we want to go into the cloud, or we want to expand our cloud consumption, or we want to add certain new services from the cloud. I mean, everything around cloud is gladly taken by a software publisher right now. That's kind of, that's how their scorecard is defined. Selling cloud definitely triggers a higher bonus on the side of the account manager from the publisher. But I have seen so many projects not fail, but actually coming with over ambitious timelines where you say you want to achieve within 12 months what others did in 3 years. I have seen, for instance, even empirical studies coming from SAP where they said, a migration to S/4HANA on average takes 18 months. Interestingly enough, most customers that I'm working for when it's around SAP, no one did that in 18 months. That's typically 24 months on average, what I have seen 36 months. So wherever that number is coming from, if it's actually the foundation or the basis for a decision to actually go into a license agreement where you already sign up for S/4HANA and purchasing, some new, SAP products that are available with S/4HANA, you may get stuck with that license, as Dandy pointed out, and you pay support or maintenance for nothing that you can actually utilize because they're not there yet. The systems are not implemented. The data is not migrated from the old system. And there are other dependencies that you may have forgotten about, which means, you cannot just migrate to S/4HANA because of, I don't know, some third-party application that still relies on the old ERP system. And then, you may end up with something like, a deal which over time is really costly. So if you don't get any external support, if you don't really prepare for a negotiation, so you continue as is, you can be prepared for a massive cost increase. Most publishers, by the way, have a year-to-year or year-over-year cost increase, which are kind of between 3 to 10%, depending on the publisher. Microsoft, on average, it's pretty much always at the end of the year, like in Q4, where they increase pricing. And we have seen sometimes price increases that were almost as low as 1% and sometimes 10%, depending on the demand. They pretty much know what customers want. They pretty much know what they want to sell, and they actually set up their pricing based on that. So you can rely on that the software publisher will give you a good price without you asking for it, but you probably will end up really with a higher price per unit that you could pay if you have someone on your side or if you are well prepared for the negotiation. And again, what you also are facing is the risk of significant overspend on services, licenses, maintenance, and support. And last but not least, the risk of fit gap. What do we mean with fit gap? Which means you buy software that you cannot use, or that is not really, you cannot really integrate it. Maybe there is a configuration required that you didn't plan for. You need to have an interface, and there are certain standards that you were expecting to be already in the software product, but then you find out it's not the case. So at the end of the day, you may really have a solution that you can work in a silo environment, but it's otherwise not connected to other systems. People will not really use it because it's the usability is not as you expected it to be. The user interface is not really as you would like it to be. So you actually really didn't listen to the business side. Maybe you really didn't check on what is currently in use. And then you just buy because some marketing language lured you into a purchase. We hope you never do that. So first of all, we would definitely always recommend to try to negotiate and negotiate hard. And as we said, we have the skills to help you to actually create that drop in that cost development over time. So where you can have someone which really brings in this level of expertise, the knowledge on which triggers an additional discount. So to know which buttons you have to press on the software publisher or service provider side to make them drop the price. Is it by maybe overcommit on something that you will definitely use, or is it maybe where you come in with a trade-in? Is it maybe something where you purchase license through a specific license agreement or in a specific country? All of these things may trigger an additional discount or may trigger additional cost, and you should know which are the no-nos or the yes, to actually get to a favorable deal. And what we see is that on average that we help customers then in a negotiation to get to a pricing advantage of 10% on average in comparison to the price that you would get without this support. Nonetheless, even though you have now a better price, you still are facing this risk of fit gap. Plus, you may have a better price, but you may have idle capacity costs. So the price per unit is lower, but you still have too many units, right? So this is something where we always say it has to have this right sizing as another exercise. And this is where you really have, at the end of this exercise, a demand-aligned solution setup, which means you have the products you need for the actual business demand to really support your business capabilities. If you look at this from a more enterprise architecture perspective, you have business capabilities that actually ensure that you are profitable as a business, that you make revenue, that you are successful. And for those business capabilities, like, I don't know, production research and development, you want to have the right tools, the right products, the right services, to make your life easy. So this is what we consider being demand aligned. So there is a demand in the business, and what you purchase as software or as a service should really be aligned with that. And that's not just from the product perspective, but then really from the terms and conditions, from the pricing, the maintenance, the software level, service levels, all of this. So what we are looking for is really flexibility, and it's kind of a buzzword, lean IT with a holistic IT lifecycle management, so that you really actually phase out end-of-life software products before you run into also, risk because of vulnerabilities and other things as well. So it's really where you have not just right pricing, but also right sizing. And with that, we typically see year-over-year cost reductions of approximately 20% on average when you actually go this right sizing, right pricing approach as a combination. And we will have a use case just on the next slide. So let's go to the next slide. So just one example, a Fortune 500 company, you could say from the number of employees, that's pretty much a Fortune 500 company that we worked with to go through this approach, where we really looked into several topics. Like for instance, how many endpoints and server instances do you really need? And we found hundreds, I would say hundreds of spare devices that were just laying around in the IT department to be used just in case if another device actually would break down, needs to be repaired, and they just kept a whole lot of devices as spare devices. We also saw with that company a whole lot of server instances fully underutilized, which means they were running at 10% utilization. So a whole lot of potential to consolidate server instances to also reduce not just software licensing costs, but also hardware costs and service-related costs. Well, there was also a company that started with cloud, and like many companies that start with cloud, every business unit, every legal entity kind of starts their own tenant, which really reduces flexibility if you think about it, because you cannot swap licenses around. So it's nothing that's really helpful if you want to be more flexible in kind of like replacing a subscription with a user or like take a subscription away and give it to someone else. So we actually helped that customer to reduce the cloud tenants by 15%. We actually, if you do the math, you can say we actually reduced 2 of the tenants, and you can do the math how many tenants that customer had. Also, we actually were able to clean up their software portfolio. We found out that this particular customer used, I don't know, as far as I remember, they used over 5 different publishers for a PDF generator. 3 publishers for engineering applications, where the actual requirement for engineering was absolutely identical. So there was no need to go with Dassault or Autodesk in the first place. Actually, just going with Autodesk would have done the job. So, and that was just really one of the more expensive publishers that we were able to kind of then consolidate on, but others as well, like 4 different workflow solutions, 2 different ERP systems. This is a very long run approach. So if you want to take a software publisher out of your portfolio, that's typically not something that you do like in a day. It takes time. So being prepared for the next negotiation with a publisher, it's maybe a good idea to actually start early, and really saying that some of those projects may go on for 2 years or 3 years. So start early, as early as possible. That was actually just on the right sizing. So really get the demand or the infrastructure cleaned up. And that already gave 5% of their overall annual IT budget. And then we just took what we knew about those different publishers and what software products are really needed, and put that in front of the publisher, like Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce, and said, now that we know what we need, this is what we want to have in the agreement. So we actually were able to reduce Microsoft by just switching from something like Office 365 E3 to something like M365 F1. So there are sometimes easy savings, and since most of those subscription agreements allow for a cutback, for a reduction, we were able to reduce the overall licensing budget by approximately 2 million euros for that customer. I'm talking about year-over-year costs here. The same with Salesforce. They were in a very unfavorable agreement where they use certain products that are then coming with a licensing that's related to revenue you're generating. I mean, I could go into details here, but just that you understand, there are certain triggers that really create massive license costs, and we help to identify those, check if that's the right fit. If they are, okay. If not, we will try to find, the best replacement that you can think of, which means it's still the best fit at lower cost. With the overall approach that we applied here, we were able to generate savings of 30% of the annual licensing budget, which I think is quite substantial. I'm not saying that this is something that applies to all the customers out there, all the organizations, but there is money on the street that that you may just passing by. So definitely look out for those savings. Next slide.
Can I say something on, just a comment on this?
Sure.
Another project
Sorry.
Another project we have done as well for a client from the industry sector, where we had the challenge to consolidate worldwide engineering software, was that after the negotiations, we have signed a contract with a discount for the software with more than 40%, and for the maintenance and services, we have reached a discount of 20%. And especially in regards to unused software, I just want to notice that that we are as well seeing always during our consultancies big potential in reducing maintenance costs for not used software, which is still under contract. And this is as well has a big potential for further savings, right? Just to keep this in mind. So now you can please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for this additional comment, Dandy. So maybe it's sometimes just one publisher. You know, it's not said that this has to be always kind of a holistic approach, but if you even scrutinize the demand for a specific software product from a specific publisher, you're better off than just going in and trying to look for the better discount. So you need to have a clear understanding of your actual demand, and without that, you know, as I said in the beginning, you know, if you're not prepared, you're prepared to fail. Next slide. So if we actually, you know, looking into this approach that we are presenting here, we are really trying to right-size your demand. And even though this arrow indicates that your demand should be kind of like smaller at the end, that's maybe not the outcome. It could also be bigger. You know, sometimes it's necessary to invest, and you may have to replace, you know, old infrastructure. Like, you're still running Windows 7. Believe me, there are quite a few companies out there that still run a software that is not under maintenance, neither the standard nor the extended one from different publishers. So you're still under the risk of you know, of getting attacked by someone who still, you know, wants to attack old Windows 7, Windows Server 2008, etc. So it might also be that your demand, when we help you to actually right-size it, will be bigger at the end. But you definitely then know that what you have on that, you know, or in that table at the end of the day is really what your company requires. But yeah, we will help you to actually then, and that together with JD 1998, sorry, we actually help you really to collect that demand and qualify it, and not just looking at what you currently use, but really going into the discussion with your organization, like what are the expected changes? You know, that can be an organizational change. That can be something like really end of life. So there must be some migration to a new technology. Maybe you are not satisfied with a current service provider, or maybe you really plan to consolidate on a certain technology. So based on that, we're then trying together with you to find the best fit IT solution or service provider, and also to define the best fit operating model. So we always take this from a total cost of ownership perspective. And then that would be then with the help of JD 1998, we actually help you to also get the right pricing. And, you know, with this years of experience that we can bring to the table, we really can help you to you know, go into these sometimes high value negotiations and complex negotiations. You have several, you know, account managers on the side of the software publisher in some cases. And, you know, you need to actually coordinate between them. And then you have also procurement in your organization, and then maybe IT, and you end up in a meeting with 10 or more people. So actually, in such a complex scenario, we really can help and be the moderators, and if you want, we can even lead those negotiations for you. Yeah, and what's the reason for that? Yeah, we want to have one result for you: low cost, lean IT. But not like low cost just for the sake of being low cost, but really because you have the right fit solution for your demand at the right price. So how do we typically do this? And I will show that on the next slide. So what is a typical fit gap analysis look like? So it's most often that we, you know, have an existing solution. It's, you know, maybe for a scenario where you want to replace a certain application with a different one. So you're looking for justification of why you want to have that replacement. And yes, we would then look into your existing solution, check for things like what's the business impact? Does this solution fulfill architectural requirements? If you don't know about what the architectural requirements are, we can even help you to define them. What are compute resource requirements, interfaces, integration, user management, security and data management, plan, build, run, and overall cost? It's kind of a subset. We could even expand that assessment table to include more aspects, but these are the ones that we typically see being relevant. But yeah, based on what you currently use, we would then identify a potential alternative, and maybe not just one. Maybe there will be a second or third best option we need to include, just also to support a decision-making process. And they don't want to say that Oracle or Microsoft are always the best choice for a database. It always depends. It depends on what the requirements are from the actual application that require a database backend. It may be related to the experience you have in your organization to work with one of those two providers or software publishers, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe it's not just one solution we need to assess, but we would list them and collect the pros and cons and help you to then really identify the best fit. How could this look like? Well, for instance, we would end up with a comparison of your existing workplace solution, your content management system, your production line management system, or your ERP solution, and would help you to actually identify of where they are. Believe me, there are more tables and more data that is used than as actually a source to create views like this, but this would be really the outcome. It could also look like a heat map where we help you to understand of where you have actually technology that needs to be replaced or that is not really a best fit as of now, in the context of architectural fit, infrastructure fit, security fit, or from a pricing perspective, there may be a less costly option available. All of that would be documented for you so that you can make a final decision how to move forward, or you just go with our recommendation and use this as a foundation for a discussion with a software publisher then together with us. Okay, next slide. So what's the actual solution? So to actually fill that gap between, just go with what the software publisher or service provider puts in front of you to actually have that right sizing, right pricing. What you need to do, first of all, you need to understand of where you are. So first of all, you should know your demand, your infrastructure, contract, licenses. So what is the current setup? You probably also want to talk to stakeholders to understand of what they expect, because again, what you have purchased in the past may not be accepted. It may be used, but not accepted by different stakeholders. They don't like it. They think it's too expensive. They think it's too complicated. They are looking for additional features which are not available. So this is the current state assessment. And last but not least, you also need to understand of where you want to be. So based on what the gaps are in comparison to what your stakeholders want and what you currently have, there is a gap. We can probably agree on that in a second. But then to know of where you want to be is a different ballgame. So, if there is a gap, it doesn't say that this gap just reflects the target state. No, it could be that that you can kind of purchase a software product which your stakeholders don't even know about, right? And where there are features that they never thought of. And we are living in an age of innovation where we talk about, I don't know, digitization, big data, artificial intelligence, all of that, where quite a few customers that we work with are still kind of doing IT as you have seen it 10 or 20 years ago. So it's, when it comes to target state, it's not just to say that there is a gap between what we need and what we actually have agreed with a software publisher or service provider. There may be even a gap above that. So until you need to actually come to a conclusion of which solutions and services really support your business to make your business successful, not just now, but in the next 3 to 5 years. And yes, you also need to have a business case, because whatever you do, whatever negotiation will go into, at the end of the day, something needs to be purchased. It's highly unlikely that you go out of a negotiation and there is no US dollar or no euro transferred to a software publisher or service provider, because that was the reason you were in the discussion with them, right? So, but you need to have a business case where you can showcase these are the benefits for our business and this is how much it will cost. So if you look at something like an action list, what you can do is, so first of all, also find a sponsor for this exercise. So for those pitching activities, you need definitely a sponsor. That could, be your CFO or CIO that actually really has a direct interest in the result to make his life easier or to reduce cost. Those two listed here are typically the ones that you consider internal sponsor for an exercise like that. At the end of the day, you need to spend money to save money. So you need to secure budget. But I see that more and more often that in a leadership team meeting or in a board meeting, if you don't come with facts and figures, they are very reluctant to approve budgets. So you need to have the facts, the numbers, the data that backs up your business case. And this is what we would also help you to establish, really that target state definition is not just about a buzzword or a software product, actually also to have that backup information to help you to get that budget approval. And last but not least, we always recommend to involve experts that really help you to have a broader understanding on the available solutions out there, on the products that come from different publishers, on their dependencies. Let's take, for example, that SAP is now in a strategic partnership with Microsoft so that you can run SAP on Azure. And that's maybe kind of well known in the industry, but there are other dependencies, and we have a very good relationship with those publishers just because we need to know about their license terms and conditions, about their products, so we can really help you to get to this level of like documentation, transparency, the data that you need. So we can really help you here. So if one thing resonates with you at the end of this webinar, so please get qualified support, either from internal or as we are external specialists. We can really help you here. Next slide. And that's actually everything for today's webinar. So I hope that was valuable for you, and you got some insights and potential approach that we would bring to the table to help you actually to identify saving opportunities, but really from kind of the actual starting point, your actual demand, your business needs, down to having a good contract in place where you feel comfortable with, that really reflects the things that we just talked about, flexibility, right products, that will be really utilized at the right time. That's really what we want to help you with. Yeah, that's all from my side. You see our contact details here. So whenever you have a question, just reach out to myself or Dandy. And on the last slide, just for me to say thank you for your participation. And as Braden pointed out, you can also send your questions to the email address that you see on that slide. Thank you very much.
Many thanks.